Access to medical care is becoming more and more of an issue here in Guam, and it doesn't even matter if you have the ability to pay. It's getting harder to see a doctor, to get an appointment, or to get the specialty care that you need. So I want to show you a growing solution to a growing problem. They're going to go out of their way to help find you a solution. And they've been growing their clinical services. Aside from this place looking and feeling homely, like this is their waiting area. Like, I don't think that people really understand that they do full clinical services here. Like, this is one of their clinical rooms. Look how nice it is. You get your vision exam here. So do you need to see an OBGYN, get family medicine done, internal medicine done? This is all stuff that's done here at the Total Guam Foundation. And just to tell you again, this place is not for profit. This is the psychologist's office. Yes, they have a psychology department. They also do psychiatry. It's an entire mental health department that they have here on top of all the other clinical services that they provide. If you need medical care, if you're having problems getting a doctor, getting an appointment, call the Todu Guam Foundation at 649-TODU or 649-8638. You can visit them on the first floor of the Sunny Plaza building that's next to Sunny Outlet and behind the old Bank of Hawaii building in Tamuning. Good morning and welcome to this new week. It is the morning news analysis and it's Sunday, the start of the week, at least for me and for many people I know. If tomorrow is the start of your week, well, welcome a little bit early. It is now 8:04 a.m. on Sunday, June 14, 2026. A very happy birthday to my younger sister, Tiara. Today, the most important thing to talk about is the weather today. We're going to have Landon Aydlett on the line on the other side of the commercial break to let us know what might be creeping up upon the Mariana Islands within a few days. And if there's anything that we need to start preparing for. I also want to talk to you about two stories that we published yesterday. One is about the reactions to Guam Department of Education Superintendent Judy Wampat's plans to close certain schools and how gubernatorial candidates have reacted to that, especially one candidate for lieutenant governor who minced no words and slammed the Board of Education. And then also some breaking news that we had last night, something that we've been following for a few weeks, and it is a grass cutting and maintenance business called Property Pros. And we happened upon the name because of its increasing contracts throughout government of Guam agencies that seem to follow at least the agencies where Comfort Cuts had its contracts with the government of Guam. And so the place where we started our investigative reporting on this Property Pros issue is the Department of Parks and Recreation, where the deputy director is the father of the sole member of Property Pros. We'll talk about that and we'll show you those documents and we'll talk about these three issues starting on the other side of the commercial break. Good morning. Stick with us.
Good Morning Show with Troy Torres is brought to you by 76 Circle K Guam.
Welcome back to the show and a blessed morning to you all. If there's anything that I would like to leave you with by the end of this show, it is that if you weren't planning on going to Mass today, then I ask you to go to Mass today. If there's anything that I ask you to take away from this show, especially on this Sunday, it is that. Now, the second thing I ask you to take away from this show is to follow the advice that Landon Aydlett, meteorologist with the National Weather Service Guam office, gives to us this morning and anytime that these guys speak. Good morning, Landon. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing well. How are you doing, Troy?
I'm Sundays are the days I'm most excited because the week is young. I'm supposed to have my break yesterday. I didn't really have it. I had my break on Friday inadvertently, but Sunday is when I'm most excited, and then the week happens, and then by Wednesday I'm like, gosh, why is the week still happening?
I'm not quite familiar with that terminology you use, break. I
Yeah,
don't
I
quite
know.
understand that.
I know. I'm so sorry. And thank you and your brother and your team always
Yeah,
as tired as you guys get, as exhausted as things, exhausting as things get, you guys are always willing to talk to us about
yeah,
and explain things to us. So thank you so much.
yeah, absolutely. And of course, we're going to be chatting about this 92W that's still sitting out there. And let me tell you, 24 hours ago when you and I chatted, I mentioned that I'm flying on Saturday the 20th on vacation for a week. And while I've had my fingers on the trigger about canceling or delaying that trip, I'm not in a hurry to make any changes right now based
Okay.
on what's evolved over the last 24 hours. We're still in the realm of speculation.
Okay.
We've been waiting patiently for this thing to start initiating some consolidation, and it's still not happening yet. So we're still 24 hours later, it's Sunday morning, and nothing much has changed. It has shifted a little bit west northwest. We're currently located and centered around 7 north, 170 east, just southwest of Maduro, and it's going to be slipping into Coachray State soon. But
Okay.
this is still a very broad, a very weak, loosely defined circulation. And so until we actually start seeing some consolidation and initial development, we're still going to be in that speculation mode. And so any speculation of a category 3, 4, or 5 storm coming through the islands, it's wild speculation and reckless because there's no certainty to any of those solutions or any other solutions. And so I want to communicate that the possibility of this thing's not developing at all, that's still on the table. It's a very slight possibility, but I think we will see something organized out of this as we go through the week, but any development's going to be delayed a little bit further. And so some of the models were having development this past Friday. On Saturday, that did not happen. Other models were showing development Monday, maybe even Tuesday before things start coming together. And by Tuesday, this thing's going to be halfway to the Mariana Islands. And so the time and distance will be significantly shortened for any significant development, which is good for us.
Okay.
But nevertheless, we do have to watch this closely because it is a tropical system out there, a broad area of disturbance that could develop in the coming days on its approach. But there are no certainties, no guarantees with this. And so, as we discussed yesterday, my anxiety and stress level is still zero. That's not going to be changing. My irritation level, maybe not as high as it was yesterday, because I do think there is a slight chance I could be on a plane on Saturday and out of here.
Landon,
But we will have to see.
how often will we encounter a situation like this where we're having these types of conversations with or without the development of any strong storm that hits any one of the Mariana Islands?
Yeah, I think
This
it's
year.
going to be basically, I think it's going to be every system. And we can have these conversations more often than we prefer to, because every storm system in its development stage, we go through this period of speculation. And that speculation, this is where we're seeing those weather apps on the phones and
Yes.
images circulating on social media and a lot of rumors and hearsay and panic. That speculation, that period can last anywhere from days to weeks, depending on the situation. And we've seen these long range models toying with tropical weather development, sometimes for a couple of weeks before something does eventually materialize. And this is where I caution people, don't share those images from weather apps, because we're seeing that stuff and we see this all the time in the long range. But now with the advent of social media and all these Facebook and YouTube pages, there's so much ease of access to all these graphics that we've seen for years. And so patience is going to be key, because we're going to see this a lot. And that speculation, again, that period of speculation can go for days or weeks. And we're not really concerned about things until things start to initialize. And that's when we start seeing that disturbance at the surface, the circulation starting to consolidate. Then we have something to be focused on.
So nothing really much has changed since yesterday, which is kind of good news, right?
Correct. That is good news. So I think my overall emotion and feeling right now is a little bit of relax, a little bit of ease compared to yesterday,
Okay.
just because things are kicking off. And it could start to spin up later today. It could start spinning up tomorrow. And then we do have to ramp up communications and plans and posturing accordingly. But right now, that time is not yet happening. So we'll watch this closely. Uh, my advice to people is to stay very well aware with our forecasting conditions at weather.gov/GUM for all the latest discussions and information. The forecast for the weekend and the remainder of the week ahead, beautiful weather conditions. We do have a slight chance of thunderstorms today with the upper level environment a little bit conducive for thunderstorms, so keep that in mind. When thunder wars, get indoors. But otherwise, the next several days, beautiful. We're still maintaining a conservative forecast for late week and into next weekend until we start getting some kind of resolution on what 92 is going to be doing.
When you say it's going to be beautiful weather, do you mean it's going to remain hot?
Yeah, unfortunately. So we're not going to have a lot of cloud cover. We do have a weak surface trough. Yeah, we have a little bit of cloud cover nearby, I'd say, with a weak surface trough pushing through in the upper level environments. Hoping to do maybe some briefly heavier showers, but otherwise it's going to be an abundance of sunshine the next several days and moderate trades, gentle to moderate trades out of the east. But of course, all questions will stay focused on Thursday, Friday, Saturday. The initial time frame of something passing through the region, we're still looking at Thursday night through Saturday morning. But what and where, that's the big question that remains. And right now, there's no change in forecast, prognosis, or anticipation. And we're holding steady at this point.
Now, you mentioned speculation and rumors out there. Are you seeing that more online about and any specific warnings of like things to stay away from?
Well, I did see a chat message. Somebody sent me a chat message yesterday saying it's circulating in a number of community chat groups here on Guam. It was broadcasting a category 4 or 5 coming to Guam within 4 or 5 days. And that is grotesquely not accurate.
I did not see that, but I think people don't send me that stuff because I think people know I'll get irritated by it, you know? Like,
yeah, I sent that to a number of my chat groups and coordination groups, and I said, this is reckless. I don't know the origination or the source of this, but this is not accurate. And while it's a distinct, slight possibility, it is not a likely scenario at this point, and there's no certainty about any particular solution. So any claims, including that one, is reckless to make at this point, especially with the PTSD that's rampant through the islands following Sulaku. So those claims are rumors, and it's reckless to even propagate that stuff if you receive it.
Yeah, I agree. And the important thing that I continue to say is just pay attention to what you guys forecast and what you tell us on a daily. And then, as you know, if things ramp up, you guys are pretty much like every 3-hour release of information operation, which is, you know, that's great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're going to have a discussion with the CNMI Homeland Security folks today. They're requesting not a heavy weather brief, but as I call it, a light weather brief, just to get all the people in the room together, just to talk about things and scenarios. And again, we're not urging any actions at this point beyond awareness and general preparedness, as we should all maintain year round. But we're just going to be talking about the scenarios and the possibilities. But right now, we're just going to maintain status quo, and we're going to watch things closely. But once we move from that realm of speculation to initiation or initialization, then we have to start bolstering communications, coordination, and likely some actions. But we're just not there yet.
If there is a consolidation that happens between now and this afternoon, can we have this conversation tonight, or would you prefer that we have the conversation tomorrow morning?
I think tomorrow morning's best, okay. But if there's a rapid organization, then we can, of course, chat anytime, including this evening. Okay. But right now, I just don't anticipate that happening. But we'll be watching.
Okay, cool. Very cool. Thank you, Landon. Is there anything else you want to add for our viewers?
Just again, don't stress out over this. We may have something coming later this week. We may not have something coming later this week. But right now, all the solutions are on the table, and there's no commitments, no guarantees at this point. So stay aware and just maintain that state of preparedness. That's the best we can do at this point.
Thank you so much, Landon. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Have a great day.
God bless.
Thanks. That was Landon Aydlett, meteorologist with the National Weather Service Guam office. I think now it's between him and his brother. They've taken the role of chief meteorologist, and I think his twin brother is not in Guam, so Landon might be the acting chief. I'm not. I should have asked him that just to be more accurate about their titles. But anyway. So I think the best news that came of that was that Landon was not, as of this morning planning to cancel a trip that a vacation that he's scheduled to take around the time that some models have some type of system coming closest to this region. Um, uh, but you heard him talk about how what they're looking at is if there is something that develops and comes toward this region, it's going to be something around the Thursday, Friday, Saturday range. But from now until then, the weather is going to be good. And when he says good, he means hot, which is not, that's not good for me. But yeah, I guess we're not going to have storm-like weather between now and at least maybe Wednesday and then or Tuesday or something like that. But he'll be paying attention. National Weather Service will be paying attention. Another key takeaway from that is apparently there's something going around showing rumors or speculation of a category 3, 4, 5 type of system coming this way next week. Landon Aydlett says it's absolutely reckless to pass that kind of thing around. And I agree. I agree. You know, back in when I was in the government, we didn't have the technology that exists today where or the confluence of technology that exists today where you're able to get all this weather stuff and then pass it along very easily through WhatsApp. And so when I was in the government and dealing with crisis communication, we did not have this issue. And I wonder how the government is training for and how it handles stuff like this, because one of the key barriers to crisis communication is rumors, and rumors can lead to death, and it's just such an important thing to try to prevent. And one of the biggest ways that we tried to prevent rumors when I was in the government was that we would just put out information all the time, and as much information as possible, so that people weren't having to ask questions. They would have the answers right there, and then there was no need to speculate, and then the rumor mill wouldn't get started. But anyway, I guess that's how everybody does it, right? Or every administration is different, but you would hope that the protocols are followed by every administration. On the other side of the commercial break, what are we going to talk about first? Let's move the Tiguac contract and property pros to the end of the show. And we'll talk about the gubernatorial candidates demanding answers and transparency from Judy Wampat and the Board of Education. We'll talk about that and bring you some clips on the other side of this commercial break. Stick with us. So it isn't just people within the Guam Department of Education, as in principals, central office staff, teachers, even students, concerned about the new management at Guam Department of Education. And of course, the lingering concerns that these stakeholders have had for years about how at least some part of the Guam Education Board has operated or mishandled their operation and broken the law and gotten involved in things that they're not supposed to get involved in. It isn't just the stakeholders within GDOE who are expressing concern. Some of the people who might be the next governor and lieutenant governor of Guam are expressing that same concern, and some very pointedly. And so here's the situation, right? You have the Board of Education. They decided last year, out of a pool of applicants that included like everybody or like all these candidates who were professionals within GDOE who in some form or fashion played a role in the massive reformation that took place during John Fernandez's time as the superintendent. Just an objective look at the numbers and the data, you saw reading comprehension scores at the high school level jump from the single digits, 6% proficiency, 8% proficiency, never reaching double digits until the Fernandez era, and then continuing to grow. I think the 30s and the 40th percentile compared to the national average. I'm sorry, it wasn't proficiency, it was a comparison to the national average. So just this massive, and of course in the younger levels, those increases were more profound, because in the younger levels, that's when they were, when our kids compete better against, or their scores are just better on the national average, right? But by the time high school comes around, there's this fading of proficiency and learning to standard and against their national counterparts and all that stuff, right? But it increased exponentially during the Fernandez era. And so you had people who were involved in that, especially Joe Sanchez and Erica Cruz, and then also Bobby Adamas. There was a fourth, I think his name is Kenneth Rages, if I'm not mistaken, who was a principal at the time, still involved in the Fernandez era, right? And still a GDOE professional who was part of that reform, even though I don't know who he is. So they all applied for superintendent, and so did one politician who was not part of any of that reform. Matter of fact, who, during her time as Speaker of the Legislature, fought against some of the reforms that Fernandez and then Governor Eddie Calvo were trying to institute, like universal pre-K for 4-year-olds. And that was Judy Wampat. The board chose the one politician, the one anti-reform person, to be the superintendent of education. That came with its warnings from people. That came with the knowledge that all of that GDOE was on the right path, at least over the past decade. And they did it anyway. And over the past couple of months, we've been seeing how the warnings have come to fruition, because from within GDOE, in several different corners, and this isn't just source reports coming to me or coming to other newsrooms. These are source reports going directly to Senator Chris Barnett, Senator Chris Duenas, Senator Vince Borja, the chairman of the Legislative Committee. The same sorts of things being spewed about hostile and toxic work environments, fear of retaliation, growing fear of retaliation, not just by the board, but now by the superintendent and her team, decisions being made about major things behind closed doors, without proper planning, without communication with the administrate or with the principals and central staff, certainly not without consultation with students and teachers. The closure of JP Torres Success Academy, not pursuing that grant, the second chance grant in the consolidated grants, the planned closure of 6 schools, the source reports from a meeting that happened, a closed door meeting that Judy Wampat admitted that she was really just using the whole threat of closing 6 schools to force or pressure senators into giving her more money. The inability for the department to figure out, for the superintendent has no idea, and she says so in an email to Senator Chris Duenas, who was questioning her about the use of $26 million in supposedly lapsed funds. And she said she was just as concerned about that too, and she was directing 2 of her people to go find out where that money was spent. The GDOE is an absolute mess under Judy Wampat. But it's this thing about closing 6 schools that has got people really riled up. Yeah, I mean, you want to close a school, you're going to have to face the wrath of that community. This is 6 different communities. This is the entirety of the South. Because if Judy Wampat shuts down 6 Southern elementary schools, there will be no public elementary schools operating in the South. And of course, you have that information coming out of that one meeting that, she said that she didn't plan to actually close them down. She was just using it as a pretext to pressure senators and all that stuff, right? But still, the anxiety that causes. These political machinations that do not belong within the Guam Department of Education. Like, we created a Board of Education to prevent stuff like this, to prevent the Judy Wampats of the world from infiltrating. And then you got to question, what does she want to use this budget for if she does not know what her financial position is, yet she's asking for more money? What exactly does she want to use this money for? Because she cannot identify school needs. Is it just for hiring? Is this going to be the next dumping ground for the administration from which Judy Wampat came? And so the gubernatorial candidates were not exactly direct with these types of criticisms, though they did get direct about their feeling about keeping the 6 schools and not closing down the 6 schools. Not all of them. Josh Tenorio and Tina Mooney Barnes were not very clear on where they stood about the school closures, and neither were Frank Blas and Mary Okada. And interestingly, Mary Okada is, I believe, the vice chairwoman. She's a member of the Guam Education Board. She was also one of the ones who supported the selection of Judy Wampat. So in the gubernatorial forum that happened on Thursday, hosted by the Guam Women's Chamber of Commerce, you didn't hear Mary Okada scrutinize or criticize GDOE like the others did. And I think that has to do with, she owns part of this. She is part of this system, or part at least of the policy that has created this system that everyone else is scrutinizing. And so it's a little interesting dynamic. But anyway, I wanted to play for you the portion of the Guam Women's Chamber of Commerce forum that starts with the question on education. And I want to show you the answers that Dwayne St. Nicholas, Joe San Augustine, Therese Terlahi, Sabina Perez, and EJ Calvo gave. And I wanted to highlight what EJ Calvo said, because it was pointed. It was definitely something to pay attention to. And he and Tony Ada provided a very clear picture of where they wanted to go if elected, with this whole education issue, if they were elected governor and lieutenant governor of Guam. But let's start this with the question, and then it rolls to Dwayne St. Nicholas answering the question first.
What institutional reformations would you pursue to address the challenges of Guam's education system, which is projected to shrink as the school-age population declines? And how would you manage impacts on students, teachers, and affected communities?
Thank you for the question. I was a school counselor, so I saw all the challenges that the schools face. I was down at Southern High, and I was walking through the campus, and I was like, wow, this kind of campus should work like somewhere in the northeast of the United States, where it's cold and students walk through the campus. And I was like, this doesn't work for Guam. I know, and there's other things that we can make reforms, and especially when it comes to special needs kids. My wife was a special ed teacher, and I was a school counselor, so we would always tag team with the students, and we had a lot of successes. But with the impending school closures, it brings a lot of I think about that a lot, because some of that stuff is down south, and those are the schools that produce me, and the kids down south, they still amen. They still respect the elders. And that was the one thing that was really wonderful about working at Southern High. So what we don't want to do is burden people with the types of decisions that we might make. So we're going to have to make sure that we do everything we can to not burden our school population, our parents, and our teachers. And
ladies, I was on the Board of Education for 6 years, and I was the chairman. I fought against FQ sanctions down in the matter for closing. And they closed it. And it all came down to management. Management today, when they talk about the 6 schools, they need to know why they're closing. And they need to be able to express that to everybody on the island. They need to be able to explain everything that's going on down south, because I'm telling you right now, those schools do not need to close. That's my opinion. I've seen those schools. They just need to know how to manage it. Reorganize, if you got a teacher 4 down south and you really only need a teacher 3, then move them. It's all about management. It's all about money. And if that's their excuse to close it because of money, readjust, realign, put people where you need to put them, and move on. Because there's many other issues up north. You don't need to burden the south. Take care of the south and everything will work its way up north. Thank you.
First, I want to say that if I am your governor, you are never going to hear from me that helping our school students is outside of my jurisdiction. Second, you're never going to find that I'm going to take money out of GDOE. GDOE teachers, staff, aides, principals, parents, they work so very hard in very challenging circumstances to bring our aging facilities up to sanitary codes, to convert to online during COVID, and many other challenges. And I will give them my full support. As to consolidation of schools, we should work so that our families decide to remain on Guam and our schools will actually grow. The goal of education is to ensure that these children are going to perform skills for their grade level and be prepared for higher paying jobs. Any discussion to reorganize should be centered on learning outcomes. If students are doing well, let's not disrupt them. We should avoid any diminished learning outcomes or any negative impacts on teacher-student ratios. There are many benefits, especially to the younger children in these village-based schools. And these schools reduce burden on underserved populations with shorter travel times, ability to participate in sports and after-school programs, lifelong friendships. The schools benefit from the village community support. And the villages are benefiting as well economically from the schools.
As to reforms, I've been a big proponent of magnet schools in our GUE system, and what that means is a school within a school concept where we expand career pathways to what currently exists, and also to make sure that we are putting competent people in positions of power to make sure that San Sanchez is rebuilt without further delay. You know, all facilities, whether they're consolidated or not, should really maximize the learning opportunities. And so as the population declines, I see the opportunities for businesses to lease these spaces where they can also provide real-world experiences for our students so that we can expose our youth to STEM careers, which provide higher paying opportunities, and even expand entrepreneurial activities. In regards to consolidation, we need to have an honest discussion, and it cannot be determined unilaterally and must be discussed with our community. And that is very critical. It's just must.
Education is a high priority for us. And we've been speaking to a lot of administrators, teachers, students, even mayors, and we've heard it today. There is a growing frustration and a lack of trust in the board of the Guam Department of Education. In the last year alone, they reported over $26 million in lapsed funds, on top of $21 million in expired federal education funds. Those funds should have been spent in our schools and invested in our students. It's unacceptable because facilities are breaking down, school years aren't starting on time, academic scores are far below the national average, and we're still dealing with double sessions. At the same time, new schools are closing and Simon Sanchez is not getting built. And the Board of Education decides to give the highest salary in the history of Guam to the new superintendent. Meanwhile, teachers are still underpaid and paying for their own school supplies and repairing their own classrooms. So, the Education Board and the schools have to focus on the foundation of our community. And if there's anywhere in the government of Guam that needs reform, that needs change, I would start with the Board of the Department of Education.
The reform, I believe, that can have the greatest impact.
All right, so Very obvious, right? Very obvious that the Joe San Augustine and Dwayne San Nicolas, Therese Chalahi and Sabina Perez, and EJ Calvo and Tony Ada. We didn't go through his response there, but he also did well, right, in his response. EJ Calvo and Tony Ada have a in-depth understanding of the issues over at Guam Department of Education. Maybe not all of the issues, maybe they're not completely mastered with those issues, but you see EJ Calvo, brand new candidate, has never been in elected office before, is not a product of the public school system, didn't once look at notes in the first 2 minutes that he was talking, and just springing out all those issues, the $26 million in lapses, the additional $21 million that was given back in federal funds, the issues with teachers' pay. There's a bit of context to add. So he talks about the test scores being far below the national average. Okay, so yes, arguably that is true, but the extra context to that is the test scores have been going up exponentially over the past decade. So GDOE, left to its own devices, is doing something right. But the moment that the board interjects its politics or anyone else's politics, like we're seeing now with this new WANPAD administration, things go awry. Things can start going south. One of the things that GDOE administration, we've been told, wants to do is to replace a rigorous testing mode with something that is not an assessment, that's not an actual assessment. And that's a story that we're going to talk about. But I mean, and one of the reasons that their deputy of curriculum, we're told, wants to do this is to artificially inflate test scores so that the public thinks that the test scores have gone up. It's just such a crazy thing that's happening inside GDOE. But EJ Calvo, he just says it right out. He's like, time to reform the whole thing. Start with the board. Start with the board. And I think that's where the accountability is, right? Like, who is responsible for these problems that are popping up within the Guam Department of Education? I'll tell you this. When that oversight hearing comes, it's going to be on the 24th. The effort to manipulate the public, to gaslight, to tell half-truths, to try to use to their advantage intra-department jargon that the senators won't understand if they don't have a mastery of these issues. All of that will increase in the attempt by the WANPAD administration to shirk responsibility for these things. And they're going to say that the source reports coming out of their agency are completely false and that they're not doing anything wrong. You know, I've already FOIA'd the board, the education board, for their communications between a certain date and a certain date. You know, a couple of the members came back and said there's nothing. They don't have communication with each other. Even though I know for a fact that there is a board WhatsApp chat where they discuss the business of the Guam Department of Education. So if board members are willing to break the law and not disclose public information because in their attempt to hide whatever it is that they've been doing, how much more so the management team that they've empowered. And you look at the problems that are happening within GDOE and EJ Calvo, and the rest of these guys, I just point out EJ Calvo because his was the strongest statement. They get it. And the question is, if one of these teams become the next governor and lieutenant governor, how does that work for the GDOE administration? Does that mean that they'll have to reel themselves in? Because they're getting a free pass right now. They've got a board that is empowering, that is just letting them go. Letting them, except for maybe Judy Guthertz, the chair of the board, who's now asking questions like, hey, I'm not for these school closures either, agreeing with Angel Sablan, who was not a supporter of this GDOE administration. And so, maybe there's some cracks here that are happening, but, if you get one of these Joe San Augustine, Therese Chalahi, or Tony Ada coming in to become the next governor, it might be a reckoning, that the WAMPAD administration would have to deal with, and that the next Board of Education would have to deal with as well. On the other side of the commercial break, let's talk about, I'm going to bring you the records showing you the connection between Property Pros and Joey Terlahi, and how this contract was what replaced the Comfort Cuts contract, but it's by people who are very close with the Comfort Cuts people. We'll get to that on the other side of the commercial break. Stick with us.
We delivered. Guam AutoSpot is extending our overstock sell-off with the hottest deals on island, like our 2025 GMC Canyon with $4,000 off. Or slide into a brand new Mitsubishi Eclipse Cross, starting at just $24,995. September is your chance to drive big and save even bigger. Visit us today or get pre-approved online at guamautospot.com or call 478-AUTO. Guam AutoSpot, where the savings never stop.
The stuff's hitting the spot. We've been looking into a company called Property Pros because it has, throughout these different government agencies that used to have Comfort Cuts as the lawn maintenance or cleaning or grass cutting contracts, Property Pros has come in to replace them. So, little suspicious, right? Like, how is this? And has anyone heard of Property Pros? Is it a new company? What is it, right? Because it's replacing the Comfort Cut stuff, by and large. And over the past month or so, we've put out FOIAs to different agencies, and different documents have come back, right? And the Comfort Cuts thing is, let me just explain that real quick to any of you who are unfamiliar with that. So Comfort Cuts is owned by Charissa Tenorio, who is Lieutenant Governor Josh Tenorio's sister. This is the same Charissa Tenorio who is the main defendant in the Tenorio corruption case, the largest political corruption case in the island's history. That deals with PUA fraud. That's a whole separate thing. That also involves the Lieutenant Governor's boyfriend, Matthew Tapasia, who is one of the main defendants, and then there's 5 other co-defendants in the case. That's a whole other thing, okay? But Comfort Cuts is a business through which the feds allege the laundering of illegal federal proceeds occurred. So Comfort Cuts is also in this federal complaint, along with Charissa Tenorio. Comfort Cuts also, according to an investigation that we completed, looking into contracts from 2019 through 2025, had more than $1 million in contracts with the government of Guam. This is a company directly connected to Lieutenant Governor Josh Tenorio that received over $1 million in contracts that began during the time, or during the first year of Josh Tenorio's tenure as Lieutenant Governor, and continued on through all these years. And it became an issue. People started to smell smoke only when Jo Nuggan-Charfaris, a reporter with KOAM, unveiled her investigation of why Tiguac Cemetery was always in a state of disrepair, and the grass being 3-4 feet high sometimes, not being cut very often, and the patrons of the cemetery complaining to the media about, hey, nothing's being done over by the Department of Parks and Recreation, which owns this public cemetery. It's called the Vicente Limtialco Cemetery, but it's colloquially the Tiguac Cemetery. So Jonah Goncharfer, she looks into it and she finds this is a Comfort Cuts contract. Who owns Comfort Cuts? Charissa Tenorio. To make a long story short, investigative reporting by all the media stations have uncovered that there were double payments or that there was billings that were way above what the contractual amount was that were paid out. There were periods when Comfort Cuts said that they were cutting the grass, but the grass was not being cut allegedly. And so there were just all these things. So this thing is under local criminal investigation. Robert Lizama, the new director of Parks and Rec, the acting director of Parks and Rec, he confirmed in an oversight hearing that this remains under a criminal investigation over at the Attorney General's office. In February of 2025, we learned from Angel Sablan, the director of Parks and Rec at the time. So, I'm sorry, let me just backtrack. Sometime in, I think it was June or July of last year. Yes, June or July of last year, Jonah Goncharfer's breaks for story. We follow with our investigative reporting on it. And during the summer of 2025, Angel Sablan tells us that he stopped making payments to Comfort Cuts in February. And it was because he was concerned and there was all this paperwork going back and forth about how they weren't fulfilling the contract. The payments and the contract were stopped. The contract was stopped in August of 2025 for non-performance. From between August and January, I think they were doing in-house stuff. Maybe they were getting the corrections inmates to help out. I'm not entirely sure. But in January, according to an oversight hearing that they just had, the department began to look for a new contractor. And something about a requisition deadline that doesn't completely make sense to me. Actually, doesn't make sense to me at all, as expressed in this oversight hearing. And I'm wondering why senators didn't press this much more, and I'm wondering if it's because they didn't understand what the process was. But if that was me, and if I didn't understand, I would want the answer. I would ask questions so that until I did understand what exactly they were trying to. So they were trying to say that because there was this requisition deadline for March, and that they were Department of Parks and Rec was unable to meet this deadline through the normal bidding process. To get the requisition, they decided to go with a 3 quotes process using non-appropriated funds and making payment through direct payment. And there were 3 companies who bid on Tiguac or who submitted price quotations for Tiguac. One called Guam Essentials, bidding at $14,800 a month. That's $200 below the $15,000 annual threshold. Another for about $5,000. I think BJSN Services, they were the lowest. And then Property Pros for $8,315 a month. And there are a couple of issues here, right? One is Property Pros was selected above BJSN, and the reason that the director gave is because there was a second meeting that was had to go over terms, and BJSN did not have a representative show up, which is not a disqualifier in a 3 quotes process. Like, they decided to go to Property Pros, but didn't answer. No one asked, did you call BJSN? Did you ask them if they were going to come in and sign the contract, or if they were relinquishing this to the next person? None of that was answered in this oversight, and these things weren't questioned in the oversight hearing. But the other problem is, if DPR knew that it needed these services on a monthly basis and understood that Property Pros their price was $8,315 a month, they would exceed the $15,000 threshold by the second month and would be committing bid splitting, which is illegal. They did it anyway. I don't know why the senators didn't ask about that. And maybe they were just getting their bearings around this issue, because here's the part that it makes things more suspicious. Set aside all that stuff, all that PTSD from the Comfort Cut stuff, because it's starting to sound very similar, right? Property Pros, if you go to the Department of Revenue and Taxation, is owned by a guy named Jonathan Terlahi. Jonathan Terlahi also is the name of one of the children of Joey Terlahi. Joey Terlahi is the Deputy Director of Parks and Recreation. If you look at the records or irrelevant tax that assign some type of identifying information to the ownership of the company, it's the same mailing address as Joey Terlahi's mailing address. Now, here are clips from the oversight hearing so you have a better understanding of what it was that was said about property pros, about who was involved with this procurement, and whether there were any conflicts of interest. And the answers are very, very interesting and something that I think needs to be probed further by proper authorities. Let me just, and here we go.
In your request, of course, you asked about the Vicente A. Limtiaco Cemetery. If I may, the Vicente Limtiaco Cemetery is under a 3-month grass cutting agreement contract. The former director, Angel Sablan, suggested a temporary 3-month agreement plan to address grass cutting on a monthly basis until the department decides to terminate the contract. The department receives quotes based on a per month charge for 3 potential vendors, and of 3 potential vendors, there was actually 4 that was responded rather, and 3 reported on the response officially, and that is Guam Essential Services responded with a $14,800 contract per month. BJSN Services responded with a $5,000 a month contract, and we got Property Pros with $8,315 per month. The 4th one was Mazuti Maintenance, who provided no quote. First initial meeting with these companies and said visit was conducted on January 26 with BJSN Services and Property Pros. No representative from Guam Essential Services was present. The scope of work was provided along with questionnaires in reference to the vendor's experience with customers that they serviced. A second final meeting was conducted on March 16 to finalize agreements. No representatives from BSJN Services and present, therefore leaving Property Pros as the only qualified vendor. The department will continue to communicate with the Department of Corrections to provide services as needed basis. So what had happened was, as a result of those services solicited, Property Pros was the company that was awarded a 3-month contract paid month by month on the services for the grass cutting and maintenance of the Vicente Limtiaco Cemetery. I went there this morning to take a look at the cemetery and to see how the conditions are based on what I've seen in past months versus what I saw this morning. I'm very much appreciative of the work of John Glenn, the administrator for taking the responsibility and the role of being the administrator to oversee the Vicente Limtiaco Cemetery. Along those lines, thank you again to the Public Law 38-81. And this one here has on to getting all these sand removed and placed right back into the water and try and bring our parks back, at least the East Agania Pavilion, so that it can be brought back to use by the people. Along those areas, extensive damage to the seawall, all the signs, parking lot, alcohol-free zone, etc., the pavilion, all pending and active contracts. All right, here we go. On the budget-wise, as you heard our budget on Tuesday, however, we'll go right into the request of the contracts. The present contract that was once awarded with Department of Parks and Recreation for Tiguac Cemetery, that was one active contract at one time, and that was under Comfort Cuts, who was the vendor. That particular contract payment was suspended and stopped on February of 2025. February 2025. The official termination of this contract, vendor Comfort Cuts, was on August 8, 2025. That's the only terminated contract. Now we have the pending and active contracts that's with us at the moment. We have the JJ Global contract at $98,885. This contract is for the Dedadu pool, the maintenance and upkeep of the Dedadu pool. That is budgeted up to September 30, 2026. Another contract that is active is with Guahan Cleaning Masters. That's one other contract identified. The requisition is still under review with GSA. Payments are now on a month-to-month basis using direct payment method under the island-wide. This is Guahan Cleaning Masters that is handling the island-wide restroom, and that is on a month-to-month basis. And Melva Limo can speak on that in depth. You want to go ahead and do that on the Guam Masters, the Guam Cleaning Masters?
So the Guam Cleaning Masters is being paid through a direct payment process at $17,898. That's for the remaining of the fiscal year. Currently, we have, for the 6 months that's left, we have $107,388. So our current balance right now is $96,158. By the end of, or close to the end of the fiscal year, I'm going to request to release the reserves to cover the rest of the months.
Okay. Is that? All right, thank you. Other contracts that we have with Department of Parks and Recreation is the usual Xerox requisition, and that is also still under review with GSA. Presently, we have the Tiguac Cemetery monthly contract that has been initiated by the former director, Angel Sablan. And under this contract, as I testified earlier, for the cemetery, and awarded here was Property Pros, and this is where they are awarded a 3-month contract on a month-to-month basis, and that is because we weren't able to meet the deadline to engage a PO through GSA, because they had moved up the deadline of all POs, requisitions and POs, a deadline of March 2026. So ASO Melva Lima wasn't able to meet that deadline, and then the cemetery needed ground maintenance cutting, and in that case, what they had exercised was utilizing the Public Recreation Services Fund, which allows them to utilize that as well for the purpose of providing maintenance service for the cemetery, and in turn has awarded that to Property Pros. We also have with us on the account side.
Thank you for the updates on the timelines with the contract suspension and termination on comfort cuts. One thing I wanted to find out is during that time that they were the incumbent providing services, was there any utilization of DOC personnel while they were under contract to clean and do services up at Tiguac during that time? I think it's going to have to be somebody else on the panel, Mayor.
Yes, sir.
So who made that request, and how was that directed, given the fact that you had a contract in place?
Yeah, I think Senator, if I may, the questions that are being asked by the deputy, although I was not employed or there at the time of this activity and so forth, and now because of the questionable activities that has occurred with this vendor and Department of Parks and Recreation, and that it is under investigation and under review by the Attorney General's office, I request that we perhaps just table or suspend any discussion, just so that we do not jeopardize the ongoing investigation, and not so we all don't get subpoenaed.
I respect that. Thank
Yes,
you. The next question, now we have a 3-month rotating contract in place with Property Pros. Is there anyone who is involved in procurement or any signatory to this agreement or otherwise within DPR have any conflicts of interest?
No.
Okay. So there was no need for any recusal to sign any paperwork, to initiate any contract, or to be a party to any evaluation or anything else. No one who is.
I just want to point out that the person who answered, that Senator Cristoenius asked whether there was anyone at DPR who has a conflict of interest with Property Pros, and it was Joey Terlahi, the deputy director, who answered no. I think that's a pretty significant thing, and they were all sworn in to testify under penalty of perjury right before this hearing began. And so, anyway, continuing on.
Allowed that to go through for this rollover purpose that has any conflict of interest and required recusal.
So as I was briefed by the park administrator, John Glenn, who handled the procurement of the services, I yield to John to go ahead and explain.
So going back again.
Did anybody notice how John Glenn Tiguac, his face jumped when Robert Lezama said that John Glenn Tiguac was the one who handled that procurement? He was absolutely stunned by the statement and that this issue was being turned over to him to answer, so much so that he never actually answered the question. Let's continue watching.
Again, with the 3-month contract, right? That was implemented by former Angel Sablan at the moment because we needed urgently for the grass cutting to be completed at the cemetery, so we avoid complaints, and so he took the initiative to implement that. So with that, it's not going through a procurement process. It's going through similar to like a direct payment coming from the Public Recreation Service Fund.
So you're using, then I'll go to the SO maybe. So this is non-appropriated funds?
That's correct.
Okay. And the method basically was using the 3-quote process. I think that's what was discussed here.
Yes, sir. What they do is they get 3 price quotes, and then we get the lowest price, and then we just write out a check.
And they all came in under 15,000?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you. So the director basically, with other assistants, I guess for paperwork and the like, basically took this initiative on as his duty.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
So you hear them quite a few times. Robert Lezama, Joey Terlahi, John Glenn Tiguac, they're very quick to say that, oh, this all started with Angel Sablan. Angel Sablan was the director at the time. He was the one who did it. Of course, Angel Sablan wasn't at the table in order to defend himself or anything, but I talked to Angel Sablan last night, and he told me that, yes, he was the one who opened up the procurement for the grass cutting services. And matter of fact, Joey Terlahi came to him and said, hey, I just want to let you know my son is going to put in a proposal. And Angel Sablan at the time said, okay, well, just go through the process, and then handed it over, according to Angel Sablan, to his deputy director at the time, Warren Pelletier. I keep saying, I think I keep mispronouncing his name as Pelletier, but I think it's I hear people say Pelletier, to Warren Pelletier to handle. And you don't hear that name coming up among this panel here. And you certainly do not hear any of them disclosing the alleged conflict of interest that Joey Terlahi has. Let's continue watching this from our one.
In terms of the grass cutting contracts, so there's 2 separate vendors for the Vicente Limtiaco Cemetery in Tiguac? Is that what?
Vicente and Tiguac is the same cemetery.
It is the same.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And they're on month to month?
That's correct.
Why is that?
I'm sorry?
Why is that?
As I explained earlier, the deadline for the regular requisition process, there was a deadline that was moved up to March of 2026, which DPR did not meet that deadline to submit any requisition, and the former director had approved or agreed to utilize the PRSF account to fund this on a contractual basis on a 3-month, month-to-month service. So they utilized the 3-method process, which John Glenn, can you go ahead and elaborate that again?
So the 3 months process is on a month-to-month basis payment, which is the funding is coming out of the Public Recreation Service Fund, and this is only a temporary fix until we can get the original contract with procurement site.
Okay,
Right
so
now,
there are plans to
Yes.
actually issue a request
Yes.
for proposal and have a long-term.
And we're still trying to work on the scope of work for that part.
I forgot to turn on my darn microphone. I am so sorry. I an entire. I was talking. I was talking about a lot. It was like, let me try to reconstruct exactly what I was saying. So John, let me try. John Glenn Titano, or John Glenn Titagui, he was talking about, the last thing he was talking about was, hold on. Let's go back to that last thing that he was saying so I can remember. And I think if I remember this, I'll be able to remember everything else that I was saying. Okay, let's just go back to it. Stand by.
So the 3 months process is on a month-to-month basis payment, which is the fundings coming out of the Public Recreation Service Fund. And this is only a temporary fix until we can get the original contract with procurement site.
Okay,
Right
so
now,
there are plans to
Yes.
actually issue a request
Yes.
for proposal and have a long-term.
And we're still trying to work on the scope of work for that part.
And if I may add to that question, Senator, of course.
Now I remember. All right. Sabrina Salas Mazzanani was on the right track here to ask why month to month. I'll explain that in a second. But John Glenn Titagui said, just said to the legislature, we need to come up with a scope of work. Why? Why do you need to come up with a scope of work? There is an existing scope of work. It has existed since 2019. It worked for comfort cuts in ways that the Attorney General's office is apparently investigating in a criminal probe. But there is a scope of work. Why does a new scope of work need to be created? And why does it take this long to create the scope of work? And when the answer from Director Lizama about why is it month to month, which is a great question that Sabrina Salas Mazzanani asks, when there's a microphone on, yes. When the answer from him is, oh, it's because there was this March deadline for a requisition. I wish she or the other senators had asked, what does that have to do with a proper procurement of this thing? Because, for whatever that answer would be, the next question would be, why didn't you guys issue an RFP in January when you said that the director first believed that you guys needed to get another contractor? Why didn't you issue it in February? If there was this March deadline, why didn't you issue it in April? Why haven't you issued an RFP since? Matter of fact, why didn't you issue an RFP back in August or September after you canceled the Comfort Cuts contract? Why have you missed all of these opportunities to do a proper procurement? And you said that you went with Property Pros, which was the second highest amount because BJSN Services, which came in some 40% cheaper than Property Pros, because they didn't attend a meeting. Did you call them to ask whether they were still interested? Why they didn't come to the meeting? How did you award it directly to Property Pros first? There are so many questions to ask here. And then you add to that, you add to the suspicion of this thing that almost in all these different places where Comfort Cuts had a contract, it had been replaced by Property Pros. Who is property? And the fact that this panel, when pressed by Senator Dueñas, are you sure no one has a conflict here? None of them were willing to answer that question. And I wish the senators would have followed that up. Like, how come none of you are answering this question about the conflict of interest here? Because according to Angel Sablan, that Jonathan Terlahi, who owns Property Pros, is the son of Joey Terlahi. And in the paperwork, the address that Jonathan Terlahi uses is the same address that Joey Terlahi uses. But let me show you the paperwork, actually. But hold on. Let me just set this up real quick. Let's go to the portion. Let me show you the paperwork over at the Department of Revenue and Taxation. Here we go. Okay. Transfer over. Here is the annual report for Property Pros. The single member is Jonathan Terlahi. It is signed by him. That's his sworn statement. So here's their articles of organization. There's a second signatory, a Stephanie Terlahi, who is believed to be the wife of Jonathan Terlahi. There's his signature, his unsworn declaration. Acceptance of registered agent. Jonathan Terlahi is a registered agent of Property Pros. The company was created, by the way, in 2024. This allows Stephanie Bonfield, or authorizes a Stephanie M. Bonfield to act on behalf of Property Pros regarding all accounts, business transactions, and documents. Here is, I don't know what this is called, but it's some format rev and tax. Here's the LLC certificate for Property Pros. So we confirmed that this is a company owned by a Jonathan Terlahi, and we looked at the identifying information, and it is the registered mailing address of the company is the same mailing address as Joey Terlahi. Joey Terlahi does have a son named Jonathan. And in that hearing, when asked whether there were any conflicts of interest with Property Pros, Joey Terlahi said no. Then when pressed further by Senator Duenas, basically asking, are you sure? They cover the microphones. Joey Terlahi even goes and he covers Robert Lizama's microphone so that they can whisper, they can huddle about their response. Robert Lizama gets on and he says, this was done during Angel Sablan's time. And John Glenn Tiguac, he's the guy that did the procurement. John Glenn Tiguac, his face perks up like he's surprised. And then John Glenn Tiguac has to answer that question, except that he doesn't answer the question. He just talks about the procurement and what was done and why they did the procurement that way. We are going to continue our dive into Property Pros and the contracts that it has throughout the government of Guam. And so that our community is much more aware of these things that are happening with tax dollars. Not so much of a surprise, though, unfortunately, right? And don't worry. We are not going to shirk in our coverage of the other investigative issues. Matter of fact, sometime today, I'll have the latest story in the behind the bid controversy. We'll continue to do our investigative reporting into what's happening over at Guam Visitors Bureau, and we'll continue as much as possible and as the resources and time allows us to be your watchdogs against corruption in our islands. For Kandit News, I'm Troy Torres. You all have a blessed Sunday. Thank you so much for spending this morning with me for the Sunday news analysis. And by tonight, I think we'll be talking about the Cortex Simon Sanchez High School issue, if I'm not mistaken. You all have a wonderful day. God bless you, and please do go to church today.